So the first time I met Scott was within the LPC, the Legislative Policy Committee that the Colorado Association of Realtors runs, one of their two committees. Now they have a regulatory policy committee. And so you ask, if you're not focused or mindful of what public policy does, one of the primary efforts of what I try to convey to our membership is, the typical saying is, if you're not part of the discussion, you're on the menu, right? That's what we do. And so realtors everywhere need to harness their advocacy power and their advocacy ability, because that's how we communicate to legislators why homeownership matters. And so, Scott, my question to you in the grand scheme of things is, regulatory policy in Colorado is being legislated. And it's very difficult for advocacy to be successful if our membership is not active. And for this year, just taking the snapshot of what the Colorado legislative session for 26 was, what is one of the highlights that you from a CAR perspective would say was important and impactful of why advocacy from a realtor membership perspective was successful?
Well, so, I mean, we'll talk about it a little bit this morning in the structure of the class, but, honestly, this was, as in the years that I've been involved with CAR, I would say our most actively and aggressively successful legislative session in the last 15, 16 years. And I'll just, because it's appropriate to say here, in this case, I had, even before I started as an employee at CAR, as CAR's general counsel back in 2015, I think in 2010, 2011, or maybe 2011, 2012, I'm a realtor member, have been since 2000, and am still a licensed real estate broker. But I was involved as a volunteer on the Legislative Policy Committee. So I was actually a member of, and I was actually chair of the regulatory subcommittee for 2 years. And that's how important that was to me. It opened, what realtors do and what the associations do at the federal, state, and local level, and PPAR, I think you guys are the gold standard for local advocacy. Have done a very good job for a number of years. What they do is so incredibly important. And when I was a local president for DEMCAR, which is the Commercial Association for Denver, back in 2009, I think, or 10, I kind of got looped into the advocacy piece of the Realtor Association as an active member and as a leader in a Realtor Association. And it turned on a light. I realized why I pay dues. And to this day, I get people to say, oh, the legal hotline's the #1 member benefit. And subjectively, I say, yes, it is. But in all honesty, it's not. The #1 benefit of your membership is the advocacy that you do in the context, the advocacy that the associations do on your behalf. In the context of private property rights, protecting your interest and your client's interest. And it has become so important, both at the legislative level in Colorado over the last handful of years, and everybody's seen some of the shifts we've seen there, as well as more recently, you guys are probably familiar with, at the regulatory level, which is Division of Real Estate Commission, and so forth. So to answer Clarissa's question in a very roundabout way, this was a very good session for realtors. The #1 sort of win that we had was related to the Sunset Review Bill and our ability to do really 4 important things in the context of CAR's ability to do 4 important things in the context of the Sunset Review Bill. One was to remove one of the proposals, which was for restitution. And we'll save a little bit of time on my class later, because this is some of the stuff that I'll talk about. I'll be able to skip over this now. Remove the requirement or the recommendation that really came from the Division of Real Estate, that the Real Estate Commission, the 5 members of the commission, be able to provide restitution to a consumer who was aggrieved. In other words, they were going to become the civil courts, essentially, to to enforce, let's say you worked with a buyer and your buyer had a $15,000 earnest money deposit on a property, and you screwed something up. You missed a date or deadline on their behalf, and they forfeited their earnest money. What the division wanted the commission to be able to do was to, in addition to whatever other penalties, license fines, sanctions you might get on your license that they can currently do, which is appropriate, they also wanted the commission to be able to force you to come out of your pocket to pay back your buyer 15 grand. Now, we have a process for that in the state, and we have for years, and it works darn well. It's called errors and omissions, or civil lawsuits. And that's a court and a judge or a jury or people who are competent and capable of analyzing a claim and providing relief to a harmed party. And that probably would be a successful civil claim against you. But the good news is, in the case of that, E&O covers you. Your insurance would cover you in the defense of, the settlement of, the payment of your civil claim, minus your deductible. Whereas if restitution had passed, then you would have not had any insurance. That would have been coming truly out of your own pocket, which makes no sense whatsoever. And I think that highlights, if anything, what I see as a much more aggressive and heavy-handed approach that the Division of Real Estate is taking, because when we oppose that, or when CAR opposed that, you all opposed that, in the legislature, they were very oppositional to the removal of that. But the realtors were successful in having that removed from the legislation, which I think was an enormous victory by you all, for you all. And it reflects the active participation. In connection with that, there were three other things that I'll wait and dive into these a little bit more deeply so Clarissa can get to some other questions. But we had added to the sunset bill. So in addition to having the one recommendation removed for restitution, we had three very successful additions. One to solve, I think, a lot of the problem with regard to the informed consent stuff that we've all been dealing with. One to deal with a stupid, silly trust accounting rule that requires any of you guys who happen to own investment property of your own or come into possession for any reason of any money that belongs to others, you have to keep it in a commission-approved fiduciary trust account, which makes no sense. No other profession, licensed profession that we were able to identify has the same requirement, but you did. And we had that requirement. It was in statute, but the division was starting to audit and enforce that very heavy-handedly again on licensees around the state. And we had that removed and had it changed. So if it doesn't have anything to do with your brokerage business, then you don't have to keep it in trust, which is a successful addition to the sunset bill. And then the third thing was cleaning up some of the language related to affiliated business disclosures and aligning that with federal law and RESPA. And I will say that all four of those modifications that you were successful in getting to the Sunset Review Bill were opposed by the Division of Real Estate. They did not want any of those things done. And despite that, based on the power of your lobby, at the state level in this case, we were successful in accomplishing those very important changes. So that was a huge highlight. I was very proud of our government affairs team, of our lobbyists specifically, and our membership for really standing up and getting a big win in that case.
Okay, so you're pretty much making the case of why it's important for our membership to be involved. I mean, I always tell this to our local committee and public policy committee. It's one thing for staff. Scott serves as legal staff. I serve as political staff. It's one thing for us to be the voice of the associations, right? Respectively. Just like our lobbying team at the state level advocates on behalf of the membership. Advocacy has changed drastically over the past, I'd probably say 5 years. I don't know if COVID maybe was the reset. But advocacy is only as impactful as the membership behind it. And so if we boast that we have, at the national level, 1.4 million, at the state level, what are we at the state level right now? Like 20?
About 22,000.
And then at the local level, we always boast 40, I think we're at 4,100 maybe, or 3,900, around there. We cannot really be successful unless that membership mobilizes. And so when we do calls for action, one of the ones that I particularly think of this past session was on taxation. Half of the session actually was directed at increasing taxes and removing private property taxation protections within the state. But House Bill 1036, I think it was, the local, Andrea, Brett, you guys remember?
I mean, I'm terrible with the numbers. That's why I became a lawyer, because I'm bad with numbers. But
1036. Was that, okay, so this particular bill, and I'm bringing one of these up because of the power of member-driven advocacy and how, and I'm not trying to, to say you guys need to show up. I'm saying you guys need to show up. 1036 was triggering a mechanism whereby local governments would have done a best use. Is that what it is? And so, Scott, when you are determining put your commercial hat on, when you're determining that a commercial property next to a residential property gets taxed based on a best use, what do you think the ramifications would be for folks transacting those types of properties and homeowners looking at their property values, the impact of taxation, how it changes the dynamics?
Well, if you allow any government authority to determine the method and amount of taxation, then I think we all know what happens with that. Taxes go up, period. And unfortunately, I think whether it's 1036 or, so many of the bills that, there was another bill that passed this year. It allows counties to create, they call it a homelessness response district. So basically the counties can create a special district, or multiple counties could get together and collectively create a special district. And the special district's charge would be to address homelessness response. And where are they going to fund these special districts? Where are the counties now authorized to fund the special districts? From your documentary recording fees. So what do you think will happen with documentary recording fees to the extent that they create a special district? They'll go up. And same with, somebody determining, or a county official determining what the best or highest and best use of a property is and what basis on which it should be taxed, therefore, taxes will go up. And these things have, one of the common refrains that I feel like if I ever testify in front of the legislature, and one of the things that our lobbyists I know are constantly trying to help the legislators understand, is a very simple principle, but they can't seem to understand it, or at least many of them can't. And that is that you don't make housing more affordable by making housing more expensive. Does that make sense to everybody in the room? There's a lot of people under the Capitol that don't understand that. It's a very simple premise, but and unfortunately, in the hope or the end goal of trying to create more housing availability and create more housing affordability, they end up doing things that impact the cost of housing, and it's an endless downhill spiral from my perspective. And so any of these bills that have an impact on taxes are probably not going to be good in terms of taxes going down, and when taxes go up or fees go up or other costs associated with development, and whether it's regulatory fees, permitting fees, all of these things, when they go up, the price of housing goes up and everybody pays for it. And it's not just the big bad builder, big bad developer who's they're targeting there. It's your clients, it's you, it's affordable housing users, it's everybody.
Okay, and then the last aspect. Advocacy, again, makes most of our membership very uncomfortable. People don't like politics. It's not pleasant, especially because groveling in a partisan environment to advocate for homeownership shouldn't be political, right? It's common sense. That's the way we see it. But it's not. It's getting in the weeds and getting dirty and supporting candidates on a partisan level. And this is where the partisan divide actually is very important, whether we like it or not, and we have to be involved in it because that's how we advocate. And so when we tell people, and I'm gonna kind of throw the curveball on the RPAC aspect, that is our mechanism, RPAC, for those of you that don't know, our Political Action Committee. That's the mechanism whereby we utilize our resources, realtor resources, to support or try to oppose candidates and issues. And so Scott, when you have a platform from a state perspective, how would you convey to members that RPAC really doesn't see the partisanship? It's about bringing our realtor party resources, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, to advance property rights and homeownership.
Well, I mean, what I point to are the very simple numbers, the dollar distribution. If you look at our candidate endorsements, if you look at the way CARPAC, which is the CAR's political action committee that just redistributes some of that money, or a lot of that money, to actual candidates and to issues, it's very purple. I mean, it really is very straight down the line, and you can look at the hard numbers. I'm sure Clarissa can get, I mean, CAR publishes those, and there's a broad distribution of candidates. One of the things, I was in Aspen yesterday with the Aspen Board of Realtors, and you know, Aspen is a very blue community in many respects. Telluride, very similar community, and I was shocked that ABOR's participation, RPAC investment participation rate among their entire membership was 84%, which is a stunning number. And there's a lot of people that are making those investments in ABOR that aren't necessarily agreeing with every single thing that CAR might do with the money. But there's a lot of people in red communities that don't necessarily agree with every single thing that CAR might do with the money. At the end of the day, it's about being in the process. And what Clarissa said at the beginning was, you know, if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. And the only way that realtors can be at the table is if they're participating through financial commitments, because that's really what drives politics. And we can have a separate discussion about whether that makes sense or not. That is the reality of the situation that we're in. And so I think the hard numbers prove out that regardless of what side of the political fence you may sit on, and I wish we could move politically everybody to a purple party, because quite honestly, I think that's where probably 80% of our society actually sits, is somewhere in much less extreme middles than we seem to have. But that is the way RPAC dollars are invested in the real world, at least in the state of Colorado, and I would imagine pretty consistent across the board, because we've got 22,000 members, and there's a lot of different political views in there, and I think that everybody can agree that the core issues that we're focused on are what are really good for all 22,000 members, and that doesn't mean that every candidate, just because they're red or just because they're blue, makes sense in that case.
Folks, in a nutshell, this is why we do what we do, to make sure that we advance homeownership, the protection of private property rights. And so whether you like it or not, and it's perfect to tee it off, because everything that Scott talks about in his 10 topics has an essence of regulatory, legal, and political essence into it. And so your jobs would not be possible, and the industry would not be possible, if we wouldn't be in the middle of it, getting down and dirty, advancing public policy, and harassing some legislators and local elected officials, and going back and forth on why things matter and why private property rights are so important to our consumers, and in turn to your ability to make a living. And so I'll turn it over to Scott, and please be involved, pay attention. It's an election year, and it's gonna be busy. A lot is going on. Issues, candidates, you name it. So pay attention, read your emails that we send.
Yeah, and respond to calls to action.